chapter 7 is called Class, Race and Power in America. And the subtitle of this first section is Social Classes and Class Conflict. So let's get straight into it. Quote, all complex societies are characterized by the uneven distribution of wealth and income, prestige, privilege, authority, and power. They also exhibit unequal levels of consumption, differences in styles of life, attitudinal behavioral orientations, and sets of values among the individuals and groups who constitute them. These uneven distributions and differences among individuals and groups that constitute a complex society provide the bases for ranking them according to class, as well as on other measures of relative degrees of inferiority and superiority. As noted by Dye, this is Thomas R. Dye in a book called Power and Society, quote, the most important bases of stratification in a modern industrial society are the different roles that individuals play in the economic system. Individuals are ranked according to how they make their living and how much control they exercise over the livelihood of others, unquote. Social class simply refers to all individuals who occupy a broadly similar category and ranking in the stratification of a social system. Shout out to you, peace and blessings out to you, C.R. Celestine. Always a pleasure to have you on board. I hope you're well, hope you're good over there in the United Snakes. I'm all right here, nice to have you on board. And we're on chapter 7 of Blueprint for Black Power by Amos Wilson. So we're on page 136 near the bottom here, and we're talking about social class. We're defining social class. Shout out to you, Lao Tzu. Peace and blessings to you. Lao Tzu said, grand rising, beautiful ebony people in the final days of the year 531 of the Ma'afa and the Nakba in solidarity with the Palestine. And yes, indeed, peace, peace, peace. Peace in the Middle East, as you might say. And yeah, Celestine, yeah, for a change, you are on time. So this is a momentous occasion. Maybe it's because we're coming close to the winter solstice or something. Your time energies are lining up with the stars. So let's make the most of it. So yes, we're talking about social class. So this is going to be from memory. I have read this chapter before. This is going to be a chapter that's going to be very familiar to those of us who have done, sociology and cultural studies and that sort of stuff. Baba Amos Wilson is very much here going to go into some of these familiar topics for those of us who are in those fields, or been in those circles. So last sentence of page 136 going into 137. Social class may be defined functionally, i.e. in terms of its division of labor, such a division deemed necessary for maintaining the structural and functional well-being of the society. Certain occupational and social positions may be perceived as more important to a society's survival than others, requiring the acquisition and possession of special skills, special abilities, training and resources, motivation, and other personality characteristics not equally shared by others. Individuals occupying such positions may incarnate the prestige and power associated with these high-ranked social positions and the conferred advantages and privileges such positions may offer. Social class may also be defined as the outcome of ongoing social competition and conflict between individuals and groups over scarce resources, including property, income, wealth, power, and prestige. The outcome of competition and conflict between those who may already possess or control such resources and those who do not, between those who want to take possession of such resources or who want to see them more equitably shared and distributed, or who want opportunities to gain access to them, remain equally open to all seekers. Shout out to English Gal 234. Welcome aboard. Good afternoon. Hope you're good, my sister. So we're talking about these individuals and groups in society basically being involved in conflict over scarce resources. Class conflict may not inevitably result from the mere inequality of distribution of material and social resources, power, and prestige among various individuals and groups in society. For all members may, to a significant degree, share and accept an ideology which, quote, explains and justifies the distribution of power and reward in society, such acceptance thereby helping to reduce tensions between the classes or groups, perhaps maintaining class harmony of a sort, unquote. And that's from Thomas Dye. Class conflict may ensue, however, where higher ranked classes are perceived by the have-nots as having gained and as maintaining their positions by immoral means at the expense of other classes, as seeking greedily to expand their possession and control of social resources and products, as seeking to monopolize social and material resources while depriving the others of their rightful and necessary share of them, as seeking to protect their position in society and to confer their advantages on their descendants exclusively, as self-servingly restricting occupational opportunity and social mobility by using various forms of political, economic, and physical oppression. So that's just a very basic overview, introduction to the concept of social class and class conflict. Very straightforward. Don't think we need to go too much into that at this point, but it's important to know one of the things that I may have said before in our discussions, but one of the things that surprised me a little bit when I first read the portion of this book that I have read already was how much Baba Amos Wilson does refer to pretty traditional standard sociological ideas, sociological concepts, such as this class conflict, social class. There's quite a bit of social Marxist kind of theory kind of chucked in there. And that kind of surprised me because in my head, I had come to see that, Amos Wilson was so popular amongst Black nationalists. And a lot of Black nationalists have got a lot of bad words to say about Marxism and socialism and, that sort of thing. But what I like about this, one of the things I like about Baba Amos Wilson is that he's not like that. He's basically saying, listen, these people have got a good analysis of Western society. So let's listen to these people who are analyzing Western society, because we need to understand Western society in order to understand our place in it, and thus in order to be able to do something about this lowly kind of place that we hold in it. So this is just another example of that feature of this book. So going into page 137, the next section here in chapter 7 is called Social Class and Ethnicity in the United States. So we've talked about social class. Where does ethnicity and race fit into all this? The United States of America is a nation state. As such, it contains within its well-defined borders a fairly large and concentrated multiracial population whose conduct, institutions, and economy are regulated by a recognized central government. It is a pluralistic society where wealth, income, property, authority, prestige, privilege, and power are markedly and evenly distributed according to race or ethnicity and social class standing, page 138. Indeed, the uneven distribution of goods and services, resources and privileges, power and prestige among individuals and groups, a form of distribution legislated, administered, and maintained by the central government through the use of positive and negative sanctions, justified and explained by a generally accepted cultural and social mythology/ideology, provide the bases for classifying and ranking these individuals and groups according to levels of class and degrees of superiority and inferiority. American society's superordinate race and classes are peopled by whites of mostly Western European descent. Its most subordinate race and classes are peopled by blacks, mostly of of mostly Western African descent. Decisive governmental and social political power are centered in the white race, especially in a relatively small, virtually all-white male, generally hereditary elite. And one of the things to be aware of is that Barack Obama, I believe Barack Obama is a distant relative of some of his, I think of the Bushes, through his mother. So don't ever get it twisted. Don't ever be fooled to think that America it's only Britain and these countries which have official royal families that have hereditary rulership. Actually, it's the same in the United States as well. I'm pretty sure when you look at the kind of, when you zoom out a bit, you see that a lot of these presidents and probably even more so, when you look at the secretaries of state and all this sort of stuff, are actually related, are actual relatives of one another. In this white-dominated nation state, the African American population, though internally stratified along class lines, is essentially incorporated as a tributary, servant, consumer-oriented social caste. White elitist domination is dependent on a fully developed system of power relationships, synonymous with the organized state, and on white elitist controlled governmental and economic power employed to legislate and enforce order among the various subordinate peoples and classes. The predominance of white power, or more accurately of white corporate elite class power, is maintained by the backing of the centralized authority of the United States federal government, whose authority itself is backed by the military, paramilitary, and coercive power it has at its disposal, like we read in the first chapter or two. This use of governmental power is legitimated by a generally accepted social-cultural, mythologized ideology designed to justify the class-racial status quo. The upper white corporate class, which generally possesses and controls the largest amounts and most highly valued productive properties and boasts the highest income, power, and prestige, is essentially motivated by and organized to realize its desire to consolidate its subordinate position in both the national and international communities. Dye, in his comments regarding C. Wright Mills's The Power Elite, aptly describes the characteristics of the ruling white elite thusly. Quote, "The unity of the top elite relies on several factors. First of all, these people are recruited from the same upper social classes. They have similar education, wealth, and upbringing. Moreover, they continue to associate with each other, which reinforces their common feelings. They belong to the same clubs, attend the same parties, meet at the same resorts," page 139 now, "and serve on the same civic, cultural, and philanthropic committees. Members of the elite incorporate into their own viewpoints the viewpoints, expectations, and values of those who count, quote unquote. Factions exist and individual ambitions clash, but their community of interest is far greater than any divisions that exist." Such an important point. "Perhaps what accounts for their consensus more than anything else is their experience in command positions in giant institutions." He goes on to note that, quote, "Power in the executive branch of the United States government, which most analysts now see as more important than Congress in policy formulation, is also exercised by individuals from the white upper and upper middle classes," unquote. So that just on that point, that's an important point, because this power is kind of about a shared community. So when you're looking at all the presidents and the this and the vice presidents and the governors and senators and all this sort of stuff, they're in the same circles, they're rubbing shoulders in the same places, they share, they're on the same page basically, even while they might differ on certain little individual things here and there and certain policies here and there. Ultimately, they're all part of the same family, just like we as Black people should be part of the same family, and we should understand that we're part of the same family. Throughout the history of America, the white corporate elite has utilized the government and the social system for its own self-aggrandizement, self-enrichment, and political economic hegemony. This trend has reached tremendous proportions in the last 2 decades, especially during the Reagan/Bush administrations. Again, this book was published in 1998. So this was before George W. Bush had come about, before Barack Obama had come about, and so on. It would be very interesting, actually. I would have loved to have heard Amos Wilson's thoughts on Donald Trump as president. I would have loved to have heard that. Maybe Trump I would assume Trump probably pops up in this book somewhere, but in his kind of business capacity. But I would have loved to have heard Amos Wilson's ideas with regard to Mr. Trump. The economic and political power gaps between white and black America, between rich and poor America have widened alarmingly. In January 1991, the Census Bureau reported that the typical white household was 10 times wealthier than the typical black household. During the last decade and a half, the richest 1% of American families achieved the largest gains in prosperity. 3/4 of the increase in pre-tax income went to the wealthiest 660,000 families out of a total of 66 million families. While black inner cities experienced actual declines in income and phenomenal increases in unemployment, the average pre-tax income of families almost exclusively white in the top percent swelled to $560,000 from $315,000 for a 77% gain in a dozen years in constant dollars. By the end of the 1980s, business executives were earning 120 times as much as the average worker, up from 35 times as much in the 1970s. Aiding and abetting the accelerated enrichment of the rich and impoverishment of the poor was the fact that the top 1% paid slightly less than 27% of their income in taxes in 1989, compared with more than 35% in 1977. On April the 21st, 1992, the New York Times, citing Federal Reserve and Internal Revenue Service data, reported the following, quote, by 1989, the top 1%, that is 834,000 households with about 5.7 trillion of net worth, was worth more than the bottom 90% of Americans, which is comprised of 84 million households with about 4.8 trillion in net worth. So, I mean, this is just carried on and on and on to this day. But I mean, the language of the 1% is only really something that came about after the 2007-8 financial crash, wasn't it? The 1%. But here's Baba Amos Wilson, a full 12 years before then, kind of breaking it down already for us and sharing this information with us. So it's all about the concentration of wealth that had been taking place from the 1970s and 1980s and has continued to this day. We're on page 140. Shout out to everyone who's with us live today. Always love and appreciate you guys. The New York Times so you Americans, you do the dates backwards. So it's got 10/5/93. I know 93 is 1993. If this was in British English, that would be the 10th of May, 1993. But 10/5 in America is the 5th of October, I believe. So got always do this translation. So anyway, the New York Times on the 5th of October, 1993, reported that the most affluent 1/5 of all families had incomes averaging 8.4 times the poverty level in 1992, compared to 6 times that level in 1967. This occurred at the same time that the least affluent 1/5 of all families saw their income decline from 97% of the poverty level in 1967 to 91% in 1992. The poverty rate for blacks was 33.3% in 1992, nearly 3 times the 11.6% rate of whites.